I dragged this old painted dresser out of the back of my truck and set it down in the driveway. This is my first good look at it in natural lighting. It's pink, and not just a little pink. It's like cotton candy left out in the rain kind of pink. The paint is cracked and alligatoring. The knobs look like they've survived 3 different paint jobs, and the poor thing just looks tired of standing after more than 100 years of service. But that's exactly why I brought it home. My name is Barry, and it's good to be with you again. Today I'm restoring what I believe is a handmade antique dresser from the late 1800s. It's an ugly painted mess, and I want to see if together we can bring back the story that's hiding underneath. So where did I get this and how much did I pay for it? I'll share that in a moment, but I'll start by testing this paint for lead. There are plenty of modern techniques for making a finish look old, but something about this surface tells me it hasn't been painted in decades. And sure enough, this time the test appears to be positive. I've actually never had this happen on a restoration project before, but that doesn't mean the work stops. It just means that I need to proceed with caution. Lead-based paint becomes most hazardous when it's turned into fine dust and inhaled, and sanding is one of the fastest ways to create that dust. So for this project, I'll be wearing a proper respirator while sanding, and gloves while scraping. Eye protection is always a smart idea as well. And look, if you feel safer going all in with goggles, a respirator, gloves, and even a Tyvek suit, I wouldn't mock that one bit. It's important to do your own research and decide what safety standards feel right for you and your workspace. So where did I get this old painted dresser? Well, for context, I'll give you a quick glimpse of a passion project scheduled for December. A Model 41 Gershner machinist chest I purchased for $80, and it's in desperate need of a restoration. I drove 2.5 hours to Sandwich, Illinois the other day to pick it up, and while there, I drove by an antique shop in town. I stopped in and I stumbled on this painted dresser for $195, a fair price just the way it sits, but probably not a good project piece if selling for a profit was the goal. Scraping this old paint was more difficult than I had imagined. Instead of peeling off in large sections, this held the consistency of bubblegum you might try to peel off your shoe on a hot summer day. It's about 60 degrees in the workshop, but maybe it had something to do with this paint remover sitting in the cold workshop overnight. Or maybe it's just this old paint. I'm not really sure, but I'll apply a second coat of paint remover. I knew I'd probably make my money back just by filming the restoration, but that honestly wasn't the only reason I purchased this dresser. When I see a piece that's been smothered under layers of old paint, I can't help but wonder what's hiding underneath. I wonder what wood the builder chose more than 100 years ago, and what grain patterns have been waiting all these years to see daylight again. That curiosity is what pulls me in every time, just the simple desire to uncover the story that's been buried beneath the surface. After a quick glance in the store, I had a suspicion that this dresser was handmade, based on the simple style and the solid 13-inch wide boards used on the back side, secured in a rather primitive manner. This is exactly what I was hoping for, and now here's the next clue. The dovetail scribe markings on the sides of the drawers. These dovetails were without question hand-cut. The second coat of paint remover did remove more of the paint, but I'll attempt to remove the rest with steel wool and this afterwash product. At the moment, I would estimate this dresser to have been built sometime in the late 1800s or early 1900s, maybe by a local craftsman, or even just someone who couldn't afford something fancy. The scallop skirt at the bottom is the kind of decorative touch that people took the time to add when a furniture piece like this may have been one of the only few pieces in the entire house. Either way, I would imagine this dresser lived a long life before the pink paint ever showed up, and I think it deserves a second chance. As I removed more paint, I discovered another clue that this was handmade. Pencil marks aligning all the nails that were driven into this 7/8 inch side panel. When I flipped this dresser on its side, I noticed the builder used these brackets to provide more integrity to the body of the dresser. I think I'll leave them and simply just tighten each one a quarter turn. The goal with this project is to honor the original builder by simply preserving this piece in a respectful manner. I often get asked, what's your favorite style of furniture? And for the longest time, I didn't have a good answer. I've worked on hundreds of different furniture pieces: Art Deco, mid-century, Danish modern, Victorian, farmhouse, industrial, you name it. You'd think after all these years I would have picked one. But recently I realized something important. I don't actually have a favorite style. I just really appreciate pieces that carry with them unique stories. Something often happens the moment I get a piece like this home, when I pull it into the workshop, set it on the bench, and start stripping away the layers. When I try to see what the original builder saw, I begin discovering the fine craftsmanship, the little imperfections that prove it was made by hand, and the beautiful old lumber with grain patterns you'll never find in a modern big box store. Somewhere along the way, usually right around the time that the wood starts breathing again, I begin to fall in love with the piece, not because it's a particular style, but because someone, more than a century ago, cared enough to build something with their hands, and it's still here. As I remove the rest of the paint, can you guess what beautiful wood species will finally be revealed? I spend a lot of time on the road hauling old furniture, stacks of firewood, tools, and yes, even the dogs. So I'm pleased to continue partnering with Lasfit, making these restorations possible. Their custom-fit floor mats snap perfectly into place, with raised edges that actually trap the dirt and water, and the mud that I drag in after a long day. These mats keep the interior looking new, with no slipping, no curling at the edges, and no mess getting underneath. A quick rinse and they look brand new again. But what really surprised me was their bed liner. When I tell you this thing has saved my truck, I genuinely mean it. The textured surface keeps furniture from sliding around. I used to worry about scratches and dents. Now, not so much. And on the days when the dogs jump in for an adventure, the floor mats protect the upholstery from those muddy paws. So whether you're a woodworker, a weekend DIYer, a dog owner, or just someone who wants to keep their vehicle looking great, by choosing Lasfit, you're choosing to support my channel, and you're playing a part in making these restorations possible. For that, I want to say a heartfelt thank you. Lasfit mats help protect your investment, so check the link in the video description, or visit lasfit.com to see if they offer floor mats or bed liners for your vehicle. Use code MCM20 for 20% off your order. Thanks to Lasfit for continuing to support my channel, and for helping me protect the truck that makes all these restorations possible. I kept the paint on the front of this dresser because it's easier to remove with the carbide scraper. I don't want to risk dripping paint remover all over the inside of this dresser. This is all solid wood, so I'll just continue to scrape until most of the paint is removed. I believe these drawer pulls are original to the piece, and I'd like to continue using them. Removing the paint proved to be difficult, but I think I have a solution. When reusing solid original pulls like these, I've come to accept the fact that the colors won't all match perfectly. You may see some of the contrasting colors on the final piece, and I don't mind that at all. I can't keep all of the furniture that I work on, but I've kept a handful of these 100-plus-year-old pieces over the years. Not because I need more furniture, but because I have this dream, maybe it'll happen in a couple years, maybe in 10, of owning a little farmhouse or a country home with some land, a place with a big workshop, creaky floors, and room to display these old handmade treasures. I already have a final finish in mind for this dresser, one I'm not too familiar with, but I do know it requires that I sand only up to 150 grit. So because this is all solid wood, I'll use the orbital sander to sand the surfaces with 80, 120, and finally 150 grit. If that day ever comes, and I have an old country home with a workshop, I imagine walking through that home and seeing some of these restored pieces living new lives, quiet reminders of the people who built them, the people who used them, and the journey they took to get from this dusty corner of someone's garage or basement to here. I actually thought sanding a piece made of solid wood might be easier than something with thin veneer, but I was wrong about this one. I soon discovered deep scratches over every surface. I'm not sure if this was an attempt by the builder to sand these surfaces using limited resources, but it was certainly intentional and proved to be difficult to sand smooth. And then there was this area on one of the drawer faces, maybe originally a knot in the wood concealed with a filler. I'll begin digging this out with chisels, but for this project, I decided against filling in any imperfections with wood filler. Instead, I'll attempt to cut a new piece of wood for this void. This was the closest match I could find in my pile of scraps, so I'll use it. Since I hadn't yet determined the wood species used for this dresser, I couldn't search for a perfect match with confidence. You may have noticed all of the nails driven through the drawer faces. Probably not something you would see today, but I like this. I think it tells part of the story, and I intend to keep it this way. The backside is covered with rough-cut lumber you might find in an old barn. These arcs with a partial 8 to 10 inch radius reveal that this lumber was likely milled with at least a 20-inch saw blade. Perhaps someone could give me more feedback regarding what I'm actually looking at. For this dresser, I want to expose its true character as much as possible, so I'll pick out any wood filler I find along the way. Here's perhaps the best look at what species I'm working with. My best guess is walnut, but I never found any overwhelming evidence along the way. That's not to say that there isn't any, but my own knowledge is limited. For comparison, I picked up this piece of walnut the other day. I think these are different, but at the moment, all I'm seeing is a turtle. This repair isn't perfect, but I'm pleased with it. However, I didn't expect the stark contrast between the two species, so I'll have to color match this later. This restoration doesn't need to be perfect, but I did take the time to remove the paint and sand all the hard-to-reach areas. Because this dresser is solid wood with beautiful grain patterns, I decided to try applying Waterlox. Waterlox is based on polymerized tung oil, which sinks deep into the wood grain and leaves a soft sheen that looks like the finish is used 100 plus years ago. It doesn't look plasticky, thick, or artificial. The finish has that warm, hand-rubbed appearance you'd expect on an original 19th or early 20th century piece. This is especially important when restoring furniture from the 1800s, where the goal is to preserve authenticity rather than modernize it. This is a very satisfying finish to apply, but one frustrating problem when applying a natural finish like tung oil to an old painted dresser like this is there's no hiding any leftover paint still stuck deep in the fibers of the wood. It seems like no matter how many hours I spend sanding an old painted furniture piece, tiny traces of paint still show up during this final step. Well, at this point, it was 1 a.m. and my camera battery was at 1%. I first tried to stain this repaired section, but wasn't pleased with the results, so I brushed in a few powder stains, which you won't see. It wasn't my best work, but helped tone down the obvious repair. The next morning, I sanded the first few coats of Waterlox with a 320 grit sanding pad, then applied the third and final coat. Some have said that I'm too hard on myself, and that might be true, but I hope you'll appreciate my full transparency with each restoration project. I think this dresser looks beautiful again, but I also think that tung oil was a poor choice. Because this was likely covered in lead-based paint, I don't feel comfortable putting this in my own home, even after removing 99% of the paint. So I imagine revisiting this project again one day, when I can place it in the entryway of an old farmhouse. Maybe that will mean sanding it down and refinishing it again. So let me know how you think it should be refinished. For now, this will replace another old dresser in my workshop, and will be used to store some of my sanding supplies. My name is Barry, and thanks for joining me. Keep an eye on the episode numbers for these video titles, because there are 4 or 5 more restoration projects coming during this very special week. Goodbye for now.